On Sunday, the 4th of September 2022, we were reached by the horrible news that a Cessna Citation had flown across half of Europe without any contact with air traffic control and then subsequently crashed into the Baltic Sea. In this video, I'll share all of the information that we know so far, so stay tuned. At this point, this is still a developing story, and it's going to take a long while before we get a complete picture of what actually happened to this flight. But what we do know is that it happened to a Cessna 551 Citation 2, which was registered in Austria under the registration Oscar Echo Fox Golf Romeo. This is a nearly 43-year-old aircraft that was first registered back in October 1979. Now, it's a Cessna Citation 2 SP, where SP stands for single pilot, which means that this aircraft was allowed to operate with only one pilot on board. And it seems like on this occasion, the aircraft was indeed operated by only one pilot, and together with him was 3 passengers, 1 male and 2 females. Now, the fact that this aircraft was allowed to fly with only one pilot is not unusual for smaller business jets. The rules and regulations are different for different parts of the world, but generally speaking, business jets can be allowed to be operated by single pilot, providing that they are under a specific weight or a specific complexity of operation, and in some cases also providing that they're not operating in commercial operation. The Cessna Citation 1 and 2 were actually the first business jets that was given the single pilot certification back in the 1970s, and the one who crashed on Sunday was a Cessna Citation 2. But after that, there's been many other private jets that have also gotten that same certification, including the Embraer Phenom and the Pilatus PC-24 and others. This particular aircraft had been based out of Cologne for the last few months, and it was operated by a jet charter company called GG Rent. The aircraft had previously flown from Cologne over to Jerez, where it landed on the 26th of August, and then it stood parked in Jerez for 8 days. On Sunday, the 4th of September, the aircraft departed runway 20 in Jerez at time 14:56 local time, and the pilot quickly received climb clearance up to his cruising altitude of 36,000 feet, or flight level 360. The aircraft reached the cruising level about half an hour after takeoff, and they were then at a position about 100 nautical miles southwest of Madrid in Spain. But at some point after this, the pilot of the Citation stopped responding to air traffic control calls. Now, different sources says different things here. Some sources says that the call stopped as early as in Spanish airspace, while other ones say that the call stopped when the aircraft had entered French airspace. Different media outlets had also stated that the pilot had previously reported problems with the aircraft's pressurization system, but it's unclear whether that actually happened on the accident flight or if that was something that he had reported on a previous flight. Now, from a pilot's point of view, it's actually quite important to know whether or not he reported it on this flight or not. And the reason for that is that every aircraft that is certified to operate continuously above 10,000 feet will have something called a pressurization system on board. This means that the aircraft can pressurize the air inside of the cabin so that the air is breathable as high up as its cruising altitude, in this case 36,000 feet. If you don't have a pressurization system or continuous oxygen flow at that altitude, your time of useful consciousness, as in the time when your brain can take sound decisions and operate your muscles, is actually less than 30 seconds. And because of that, aircraft that have a pressurization system will also be equipped with a warning system that can warn the pilot if the cabin altitude climbs above 10,000 feet, which is the altitude where the earliest signs of hypoxia normally appears. Now, every pilot out there knows that if you hear that warning, the first and only thing that you need to do is get an oxygen mask on. The second thing is to initiate what we call an emergency descent, which is a controlled but rapid descent down to about 10,000 feet where everyone can breathe again. So talking to air traffic control about the specific nature of the pressurization problem is not something that the pilots would do until they have reached a safe altitude. The only interaction we have with air traffic control during an emergency descent is to announce the emergency descent, to tell air traffic control what we're doing so that they can move away potential traffic below us. Now, if you want to see how we actually do the emergency descent maneuver in the Boeing 737, I've done a video from the simulator about that, which I'm going to link to at the end of the video. In any case, the aircraft continued on a northeasterly track towards Paris initially, where it made a right-hand turn to an easterly direction, still maintaining 36,000 feet. It then proceeded overhead Belgium and Luxembourg towards its final destination in Cologne. This was the route that the aircraft had originally filed on its flight plan, and it's likely that that was the route that was programmed into the autopilot as well. During this whole time, there was no interaction with any air traffic control unit, and because of that, several of the countries involved along the track activated what we call a PLOC response, that's prolonged loss of communication, where they sent up fighter jets to try to identify and get into contact with the crew. The first fighters to intercept the aircraft was from the German Air Force, and later on fighters from the Danish Air Force also responded to the flight. The news that we have so far is that none of the pilots in the fighter jets managed to establish visual contact with anyone in the cockpit. We don't know if that was because the inside of the aircraft was fogged up. If that was the case, that could be an indication of problem with the pressurization system, or if the fighters just couldn't see through the windows for some other reason. Now, when the aircraft reached overhead its pre-programmed destination of Cologne Airport, it was still at 36,000 feet, still without any contact made between air traffic control and the pilot on board. The aircraft then continued on a track of 044 degrees, which is due northeast, and that's likely consistent with what the autopilot would do when it reached the end of its pre-programmed route. It now continued out of the Baltic Sea, where it overflew the Danish island of Bornholm before it started heading toward Swedish airspace, which is where we got most of the initial news about this. And I have to send a shout out here to Josie, one of my lovely Patreons, who notified me and the team about this event as it was unfolding. Anyway, after this the aircraft continued its silent flight toward the northeast, but obviously it couldn't continue that forever. So at time 17:30 UTC, when the aircraft was between the Swedish island of Gotland and the Latvian coast to the east, it had then been flying for about 4.5 hours, and it had passed its destination by more than 1 hour and 40 minutes. The first signs of fuel starvation to the engine started appearing. The first thing that happened was that the ADS-B data that thousands of people were following live as this was happening started showing a rapid deceleration of the aircraft. It then started a shallow descent, which increased into a descent rate of about 4,500 feet per minute. Together with that, the aircraft initiated an initial right-hand turn, which then led to a left-hand turn, leading into a spiral all the way down until the aircraft impacted with the Baltic Sea below. It impacted the water about 20 miles from the city of Ventspils in Latvia and about 60 miles east of the island Gotland in Sweden. Sweden and Latvia immediately sent rescue ships towards the site, but the only thing that they found was some debris from the aircraft and an oil slick on the water. There was no signs of any survivors. As I mentioned in the beginning of the video, we do not know exactly what caused this accident yet, and I'm not going to be speculating on it either. But one thing that we can say is that a very similar event happened back in 1999. In that case, a Learjet 35 suffered a pressurization problem that overcame the crew, who became incapacitated due to hypoxia. The aircraft's autopilot was set to a continuous climb mode, which meant that it continued to climb past its cleared flight level up to an altitude of almost 49,000 feet. And there it continued straight ahead over parts of continental USA before it also ran out of fuel and did a very similar spiral pattern as it impacted the ground. That crash killed all 6 people on board, including famous PGA golfer William Payne Stewart. Another very famous accident, including a ghost flight, was of course Helios Flight 522, which we have covered over on the Mentour Pilot channel. In that case, several mistakes made both by the engineering and the pilot led to the aircraft taking off with the pressurization mode selector set to manual rather than to auto. That led to the aircraft not pressurizing properly, and the subsequent warnings was misidentified by the pilots, leading to, once again, incapacitation due to starvation of oxygen, hypoxia, and the aircraft continuing to climb to its cleared cruising altitude with the pilots unconscious by the controls. So what will happen now then? Well, the authorities are first going to have to start by deciding who is going to be running the investigation. The aircraft took off from Spain, it overflew several countries, it was registered in Austria, and is made by an American manufacturer. And in any case, once the investigation team has been set up, they're facing a very tough challenge. The Learjet that crashed and killed Payne Stewart back in 1999 was equipped with a cockpit voice recorder, which helps the investigation a lot. But smaller aircraft like the Cessna Citation that was involved in this crash doesn't necessarily have to be equipped with that, neither a flight data recorder. And if they didn't have those, then it's going to be a very complicated puzzle for the air crash investigators that's going to work on this case. My thoughts goes out to the friends and family of the people involved in this crash, and we will continue to update you with every piece of information that we can find over on mentorpilot.com, where you can also find other aviation related news. You can also download my free mobile application, Mentor Aviation, from mentorpilot.com/apps or using the link in the description below. There you'll get daily updates about everything that's going on in the aviation world, including live events like this through push notifications. Now, check out these videos next, which are closely linked to this event. And if you want to support the work that we do here on the channel, then consider becoming part of my lovely Patreon crew. There should be a joining link in the video description or somewhere here on screen, or buy yourself some merch. It really helps. Have an absolutely fantastic day, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.